So once again, hello everyone. It's the fifth edition of the AI Waves. And for those of you who are here for the first time, let me quickly explain the idea behind the event. So AI Waves is a series of webinars on which we are focusing on the latest in tech and AI and the opportunities that these bring to different businesses. And today we will speak about Web 3.0 and the value it delivers to different industries and businesses. And before I introduce our great speakers, let me go through the logistics. As already mentioned, the session is recorded, so you don't need to worry if you occasionally miss something, because you can watch it after the event on the recording. And the video itself will be shared with you after the event. Just make sure to check your inbox for it. We'll do our best to deliver it by the end of this week or early next week. And another important thing, if you have any question, you can just post it on the chat. And at any time during the discussion, we'll gather them all and take them up on the Q&A session that will take part after the main part, which is the discussion panel. And now let's introduce our speakers. And our first guest is Dr. Jane Thomason, who is chair of the board of Kasei Holdings and co-founder of the British Blockchain Frontier Technology Association. She is a well-known speaker, author, and thought leader in blockchain, and sits on the editorial board of Frontiers in Blockchain and Journal of Metaverse. She is a top 10 thought leader in crypto, according to Thinkers 360. She has published multiple books and papers, notably Blockchain Technologies for Global Social Change. Hello, Jane. We are honored to have you here.
Great to be here. Hello, everyone.
Hello. Okay, so let's move to the second speaker. Sophia Shluger is the Europe Managing Director for Amber Group, and she is responsible for institutional expansion both in the UK and across EMEA. As a financial services executive and global business development professional, she has over 10 years of track record and deal-making experience for Goldman Sachs, XP, Santander Investment Securities, and American Express. And before transitioning into digital assets, she worked in an investment advisory capacity within FX, equities, equity derivatives, and private debt, with a focus on Latin America and responsibility for building out new commercial relationships and investment businesses. Hi, Sophia. I'm glad to have you here with us today.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, the pleasure is ours. And the next expert is Sandra Mianda. She is the founder and director of Paperwork, an independent payments consultancy that partners with leading acquirers, issuing banks, and payment platforms. With merchants' interests first in mind, Paperwork's mission is to guide the businesses through the complexity of the payments landscape and simplifying their options. And prior to setting up Paperwork, Sandra held a number of commercial roles over the last 12 years, working in established payments organizations like Barclays, PayPal, and 11 US Bank, where she developed core payments expertise, working on large-scale projects supporting merchants to streamline their back-end processes, reduce their operational costs, and drive incremental revenue growth through optimized payments strategies. So, hello, Sandra.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And finally, last but not least, please meet Krzysztof Kogutkiewicz, who is the CEO of Nextbank, a leading cloud core banking provider in Southeast Asia, which offers a credit scoring system that implements a new approach to credit risk assessment using machine learning. This solution was implemented in several banks and processed more than 500,000 high-risk loans. The Nextbank's banking solutions were shortlisted for Singapore FinTech Awards several times and finally won the second place for the best FinTech startup in 2020. In addition to his duties at Nextbank, Chris is also our CEO at Miquido, a software house that specializes in building mobile, web, and machine learning solutions. In 2020, he was also featured in the 40 Under 40 ranking by Mobile App Daily, among other influential young leaders. So, hello, Chris.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, so now know more about the speakers. So let's move to the main part of the webinar, the panel discussion. Our guests will discuss the hottest questions regarding Web 3.0. Chris will moderate the discussion, And at the end of the webinar, our experts will answer all your questions. So just let me remind you to write all your comments and queries on the chat, and they will be answered during the Q&A session. Okay, Chris, so let's get started, and the stage is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Jerzy, for the introduction. Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be here, and I'll try to moderate this discussion in a way that it's interesting and that will also give you knowledge that I guess you came here for. So we'll try to start with a high-level discussion on what Web3 and related technologies are, just to make sure that we are all on the same page. And then we'll try to dive deeper into some specific aspects of Web3. So maybe to start, I would like to invite our guests to tell us a bit more on what they understand and how they define Web3. Because basically Web3, it's a pretty broad topic. There are a number of different aspects included. I think the definition is still being really worked out, and this will probably a little bit change over time. And so if we can start with a question, what Web3 is and why it really matters for us, if it matters. So, Sophia, would you be able to start?
Yeah, absolutely. It'd be a pleasure to start. So just as way of background, as mentioned, I work for Amber Group. We are a leading global digital asset platform with a flagship platform called Whalefin, which is an all-inclusive platform designed to empower clients to diversify, manage, and grow their wealth digitally in a secure manner. And the reason why I mention this is obviously because the way that I think about it is that in this new digital era, wealth is being built, managed, and compounded in new ways very much more efficiently and quickly than in the traditional manner. And so very much so digital assets and cryptocurrencies is part of the gateway towards the metaverse. And so Web 3.0 to me is a natural progression of what we've seen from Web 2.0 and Web 1.0. So with Web 1.0, we had static websites that provided information that evolved with Web 2.0, which presented new socioeconomic business models, including e-commerce and social engagement. And effectively, Web 3.0 is really internet services for websites or applications that will be focused more on machine-based understanding of data and provide a more data-driven and semantic web. The idea being that it will be more open, connected, and intelligent. And so I think the real innovation here is thinking about the dynamic applications that will interconnect with data in a decentralized way, which is going to provide quicker and more personalized user experiences. So Web 3.0 networks are going to operate through more decentralized protocols, and we expect to see more of a convergence and symbiotic relationship between Web 3.0, blockchain, and cryptocurrencies, in that it will be interoperable, seamlessly integrated, and automated. So that's one way in which I think about it. And Metaverse is something that, obviously will lean on Web 3.0, and that is an economy that's projected to be 13 trillion by 2030. So we actually at Amber Group have recently announced the launch of Openverse in the third quarter, which will be a gateway to the metaverse, and it will be empowering Web 2 creators, brands, and businesses with the tools and services to transition into Web 3. And I'm happy to go into more detail on what that is, but that is basically in a very rough definition what I think of as Web 3.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for this. We'll definitely go back to the Openverse project that you mentioned, and as you all know, it's Web 3 or 3.0 is basically all over the news, and it's one of the hottest topics recently. Sandra, do you think it's a hype, or it's a real thing that would impact the business, impact the technology, and it really matters as of now, and we all should look into this?
Well, I think it's certainly, probably agreeable that it's gone way beyond the hype. The use case that we're seeing, because they're very much centered within naturally the segments that probably operating already, within that kind of virtual space, and they were, leveraging similar technology that, build immersive experience. But when you look at, the wider ecosystem, when you look at the stakeholders, so who's starting to get involved, so from a media perspective, perspective, from product perspective, from regulatory perspective, and I know that's probably a whole debate in itself, it's just essentially outlined that it is a new iteration, it is a new development that you need to pay attention. Now, it is very much still very prominent within one sphere, and for me, because, to put into context, from a payment background, I'm looking and I'm getting involved in that community from a consumer and merchant perspective, because whatever is happening at the data scientist level, at the engineering level, at the technical level, at the investment level, needs to cascade all the way down to me, you, our kids, right? So what does that mean? At what point do they pay attention? At what point do that actually impact their life? So that's very much how I'm approaching and trying to simplify, because it is an extremely complex environment. And as Sophia did mention when she was explaining the definition, it is continuously evolving. So for me, I'm really grasping the element of ownership. That's really what resonates for me from a merchant, from a consumer perspective. It's the ability to control, to have much more control in terms of how you want to interact, how your privacy is being handled, and monetizing the opportunity. So it's way past the stage of a hype for me. If that makes sense.
Thank you very much. Yes. And actually, you mentioned a couple of aspects like ownership or control on data privacy. Which is basically a topic that we can discuss for an hour, and we will get back to this. But you all, like both you, Sophia, and you, Sandra, you mentioned that we are entering the era of intelligent solutions. The data is super important. The data scientists are right now involved. So this all brings me to my second question. Where is AI in this picture? Because I have a feeling that we barely started, working on the new trend, which was AI, machine learning, data science, and we haven't even got to the point that we have that many practical implementations, at least from the business perspective, because we're still trying to find, practical use of AI in many aspects. In some aspects, it was easy, it works well, but in other aspects, we are still experimenting. And now we are all running after Web3. And so Jane, do you think this will somehow work together, machine learning, AI, and Web3?
Look, absolutely. And I think that Web3 is going to allow a platform for the convergence of a number of different technologies, including AI, IoT, extended and virtual reality. The big thing for Web3 that I don't think has come across strongly enough yet is that people are talking about it as the internet of value, as opposed to Web 2, which is the internet of information. And I think that this is the big change that we're going to be able to see, is these token economies that can be created using blockchain, and then the opportunity for people to interact in a whole lot of different ways that haven't been possible before. And then you overlay that with AI and IoT and VR and data science, and you get a world of possibilities. So if I could talk to you just briefly, I mean, one of the sectors that I'm very interested in is healthcare, and I've been thinking about, what will we be doing with health in the metaverse? And you're asking a question about AI, but AI is going to be involved in almost all aspects of this, from the avatars that will be programmed to meet you when you go to have an interaction with health services, to many of the clinical applications that are already in existence, for example, the reading of X-ray films and different things like that. So I think that we're going to see that integrated with a lot of these different aspects. And as you go vertical by vertical, and perhaps some of the other speakers can talk about it, you're going to see the many ways that AI is going to be used in the different use cases of Web3 in the metaverse. But on the metaverse, last I looked, there's 160 plus companies building various iterations of the metaverse, or giving you the opportunity, like Sophia, to be able to create your own metaverse. So it's extremely popular and growing very, very fast, and people are coming up with new use cases all the time. And then finally, this is not so much the AI question, but I really want to emphasize the point that was made about ownership, and for people to have a look at what's going on now with community-owned economies, because what we're going to be able to see is moving from, Web 2.0 to Web 3.0, that communities, and let's take the example of gaming, for example, where in the olden days, the company built the game, you played it, and that was basically all there was about it. But now what we're seeing is that the developers and the players have the opportunity to determine where the game goes, what features they want in the game, and have a stake in ownership of the game. So we're seeing a move from the company to the community, and I think this is going to be very powerful.
Yeah, I actually, if I could just interject and add upon that, I think one important distinction between Web 2.0 and Web 3.0, which perhaps those are not familiar with Web 3.0 can think about, is in Web 2.0, the monetization of your data was really more on the corporate level, right? So all of us have engaged with social media, we've given up information about us, and companies have utilized that information and data and monetized it. Whereas Web3, it's sort of taking that paradigm and putting it over on its head, wherefore you own the data, you have ownership and engagement, and then you are able to monetize it yourself. And that's really what that internet of value that Dr. Jane Thomas is speaking about, that's where that really comes in. For us, we believe that digital assets are just the first step in realizing a decentralized future where people are empowered to create and connect with online communities to unlock new digital experiences. And there has been a lot of interest in the metaverse. It's been largely conceptual to date, but what we're doing with Openverse, for example, is taking a solid step towards creating a digital reality for all. So that is backed by, our expertise and our in understanding and knowledge in building infrastructure in the digital asset ecosystem. It's going to be onboarding businesses and communities into the metaverse and unlocking the true potential of decentralization because of it being owner-led. So this is really more a culmination of sort of our multidisciplinary expertise, as I said, in digital. So we're really excited about, engaging with Web 2 creators, brands, et cetera, to provide tools and services to transition from Web 2.0 to Web 3.0. And effectively, what are the sort of things that you could imagine it entailing? It will include things like mobile, desktop, VR platforms, the ability to have real-time content integration, gameplay, customizable digital avatars, NFT valuation systems, et cetera. So it'll be a very empowering and tangible opportunity for everyone and anyone to participate, to be empowered, and to be able to monetize in the metaverse.
Yeah. If I can add to that, in fact, really precisely, because I think there's one thing that quite the common people don't realize is that there's an element of our daily life that already plays in that AI. There's, of course, a lot more advancements when you're looking at certain industry infrastructure, the engineering, place where you can see simulations, where you can see, pilots and all of these sorts of environment that actually makes sense. And it's like, way detached than the common people. But day to day, we go by from your car driving experience to the way you interact with your mobile phone. There is an AI technology that actually dictates that. And what the Web3 does, it's not just the technology behind the blockchain. It's very much leveraging, like did Sophia mention. So it's the mobile technology, the penetration of that into your life, adding to the fact that you can use now hardware, software, headset to then go into a more immersive experience. And then you look at the computing, aspect of it, the development there, the infrastructure, the cloud, technology. It's all of these ecosystems, right? That is making this Web3 an exciting space. So when we go back to the question, is this a hype? If it was a hype, that would make redundant all the development that's actually led to today being able to experience that, whether it's at business level or whether it's at, down to day-to-day consumer level. So machine learning, 100%, we don't realize how much we are already into that journey. Everybody that's coming onto a digital forum, getting into, conferencing, just taking, to a certain aspect, this could have been an interesting experience, right? To kind of like have this into kind of a more digital, Web3 format, whereby, you can really have this metaverse environment to get a feel that it is not as scary. And there is definitely application that can easily, adapt to the day-to-day way we interact with, the way we go by working, socializing, driving, etc.
Yes, thank you for that. So maybe to organize a little bit of discussion, and because we already covered a couple of topics. So when it comes to AI, I think we all agree, and I also agree with you that actually this Web3 and also Metaverse can be finally a great field for AI to grow, because we've been trying to apply AI to regular business, which is not always that easy, because AI works best in a business which is full of data, which is somewhere online and it's not really real. So I think this is clear for everyone. And there are two important things that you mentioned. Sophia mentioned about gaming, and I think it's a good example, because I think it's for like every single person. It is quite easy to understand what is the metaverse if they think about gaming. It's like it can be considered as a next step in terms of gaming, right? Because it's a gaming with more immersive experience and a couple of other things. So my question is, don't you think that this is a niche, basically, metaverse, that at some point this will be really somehow limited to gaming, and this will have a hard time growing in different aspects?
I'm happy to say absolutely not very quickly to that. Look, I think gaming is super important, because I think gaming is a huge industry. It's a growing industry. Now that there's the combination of gaming and blockchain, and people are able to take the digital assets that they get in a game out and create it into fiat money or swap it into other games. It's a huge on-ramp for blockchain and crypto. And it's got a large population of people who are familiar with being in these kind of virtual immersive environments. But we're seeing, for example, the government of Seoul has announced that it's going to put its public administration in the metaverse. In Saudi Arabia, they're building a new economic zone called NEOM. They're spending $1 billion on making a metaverse for NEOM. The regulator in UAE has bought a plot of land in Decentraland, and they're going to set up the blockchain regulator in Decentraland. So, and if you think about real estate and entertainment and commerce and almost healthcare and chronic diseases, almost every aspect of our lives, if you imagine what's possible in a metaverse and think about how you can provide better services to people using that kind of environment, then, almost anything that we do, we can contemplate having at least some aspect of that taking place in a metaverse environment. So, it's absolutely not a niche. And I think that we're going to be seeing new sectors embracing it, almost on a daily basis. And we are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think, what's really interesting to a point that you said earlier, Dr. Jane, the healthcare piece, that's actually one area that took me completely by surprise. I was at the Web Summit last year, and there were quite a few, sorts of businesses that were coming and showcasing already how they were trying to leverage the whole AI, the whole machine learning, the whole Web3 to essentially start looking at dysfunction like cognitive behavior into an immersive way. And that's where the gaming side, when you say it's important, it's extremely important, because now the gaming, beyond the thrill of it, the entertainment aspect of it, can actually be utilized with this whole ecosystem of technology to actually solve some really important use case, right? Really important health matters. So that's one of the area. Back to the government point that you were saying, absolutely. In the UK, same thing. The Chancellor has announced that they have an absolute massive focus to make, in fact, the UK, the European platform when it comes to the digital assets, cryptos, cryptocurrencies, etc. So that is clearly a sign that it is diversifying, and although it's still happening at a very top level, it is only a question of adoption, education, before it starts essentially building some, use cases that, relate with people, right? Because the healthcare, for example, was a really good example. But people on a day-to-day basis, they want to know, or they want that to solve a problem, right? It should be embedded in their life in the way that it actually brings some value. It's, beyond just as the thrill of it, it actually solves problem. Sustainability is another area that's getting a lot of focus. There is quite a few conversations within the airline, within the travel, where they're trying to bring this on beyond trying to attract the brand, kind of like early adopters, hype that comes with, announcing that you're doing something. So, yeah, I really think that, now that people starting to understand and, conversation like what we're having today, by having such a broad representation of people involved in that community, how they understand it, it's 100% one of the way forward to start, enabling those use cases, building those forums, those group, people start understanding, they start resonating, seeing and getting involved, because the main thing is getting involved, right? Building something without having the end user, the consumer, buying and playing part into the ecosystem is redundant, right? So how do we do that? Promoting education, getting involved and building.
Yeah.
And if I could just add, sorry, one thing that I don't think that we've touched on yet about getting people involved, because I was thinking as you were talking again about the healthcare example, and if we think about chronic diseases and obesity, these are massive problems in healthcare systems everywhere. And if you can come up with a way to gamify and reward people for doing exercise or eating more healthily or losing weight, and you're actually tracking this with data, and they're receiving tokens when they're achieving certain milestones and so forth. But it's fun because, there's a project at the moment called GenoPets, where it's like gaming. You have these pets, but the pets only grow and develop and get stronger if you do exercise. So people are coming up with these amazing ways to incentivize behaviors that in a healthcare setting or in a social setting are going to be positive behaviors. So I think, monetizing data, rewarding behavior is going to be a really big part of this whole new metaverse experience.
That's a great point. There's actually, I heard of a new project called Sweatcoin, which monitors how many.
Yeah, I heard of that yesterday.
You basically accumulate a certain amount of digital sweat coins that in the future will be, you can monetize into fiat. And, there's one aspect of that, which is the benefits to the individual in terms of better being incentivized, changing your behavior to be a healthier person. But if you think about the insurance industry, the healthcare industry, and the benefits to them so that they can better understand who their clients are and actually charge less premiums, because their population is healthier and is not going to need more medication down the road. There is real world impact to this technology in the way that as Dr. Jane Thomas said, rewarding and incentivizing and actually changing behavior. But I think the thing that we need to also bear in mind is that the significance of this is the change in the core infrastructure elements, right? We are building new capabilities on top of new rails. We are utilizing, blockchain and smart contracts, for example, that will open up a range of different applications and uses, and will actually have a lot of benefits, whether it be, speed, efficiency, accuracy, security, trust, transparency, immutability, et cetera. I mean, just on the healthcare, think about the real world issues we've had recently. We've had COVID, we've had real supply shocks. If you, can leverage the metaverse and this technology in the healthcare space, you can safeguard the efficacy of medications. You can actually, monitor, vaccine usage. You can reduce transport issues. There's a lot of real world good that, utilizing, blockchain, but also metaverse can actually support. International trade, it can be more efficient being on chain, for example, reducing friction and risk, et cetera, and being more transparent. And so there's so many different use cases. The last one I would mention is obviously NFTs hasn't come up yet, non-fungible tokens. However, they have huge real use cases for real estate, whether it means the tokenization of those real world assets that can be fractionalized, divided into smaller units, or exchangeable with other ones. And that, utilizing smart contract technology will allow for the ability to trade in perpetuity, to, in the art world, reward the creators of it as that NFT gets traded forward. But the point is that, technology is opening up the possibility for people to have better ownership, better transparency, better price discovery for different types of assets that have real world use and application.
Mm-hmm.
Look, I think that's great. And if I could sort of add on the NFT one, just because Sandra mentioned it before about, the green economy and the tokenization of carbon offsets and, allowing these to be minted into NFTs and sold on the voluntary carbon markets, and for people to buy these to offset their carbon footprints, I think is taking off now and is going to be substantial as we move forward into the future. So I just wanted to add that into what you said, and I agree. I think NFTs are going to be tremendously important beyond the kind of Bored Ape clubs that we're seeing now, with some real world utility, as you said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, these examples are great. I mean, this is mostly what people are looking for whenever there is a discussion about Web3 NFT. So thanks for sharing the examples. I'm wondering, what's your observation when it comes to all the projects that you mentioned? You mentioned a couple of projects in healthcare, real estate. If you look at those companies or the teams behind, are those mostly new businesses or old businesses adopting quickly new technologies?
That's an interesting
Go
one.
first. I'm happy to go second. Go ahead.
Sorry. No, I just thought that's quite an interesting one. It certainly got me to pause for a second and think. I think in my world, where I gravitate, it's actually a new industry that I'm seeing, catching on more, in the sense of, within payments, I'm seeing the native, the crypto, exchange businesses kind of popping up that wants to get, access to, on-ramp, off-ramp solutions to enable that connectivity. There is, of course, the use case at the premium hand, where you've got established brands that are looking to start tapping into, using NFTs to build a community or to, generate some sort of loyalty program. So the NFT, the use case I'm seeing with the NFT, with the established brand, is more adding on value, leveraging, building, rewarding. Loyalty seem to be resonating more in terms of real, kind of like new headway. For me, it's a whole new economy. So it's a whole different new business model that I see coming in, being the early adopters to, kind of like tapping in, designing a solution from hand to finish that's got the cryptocurrency, the NFT at the core of it, and then in between, integrating the legacy payment system. And, because of that, it sort of goes for a complete reshift in terms of how we're servicing the market, but also how we connecting all of those different plugs, right? Because it's not an isolated technology. It kind of, sort of work on the layers of other pieces, right? So yeah, for me, I think, to kind of like sum up my answer, I really see this from a payment perspective being driven early adoption more from, a new industry, plus the gaming that got a natural, sort of inclination with this new digital era. But the traditional ones, they are, I'd say less, a lot more conservative. I don't seem to see them a lot apart from the premium hand, like the brands that wants to build on loyalty community.
Yes, I agree with your observation. And this is also my observation that many interesting projects related somehow to Web3 are actually completely new projects, new teams, new companies. And I was wondering why it is like this, because we talk about AI. AI was mostly adopted by established companies, right? So they were trying to optimize the processes, to find yet another better way of doing something. But here it looks like there is a new economy, new companies being built. And I'm wondering if maybe the reason behind is something you already mentioned before, that current economy is all about centralizing the data and earning from the data. Corporate companies are earning on the data. So do you think they are afraid actually to help this economy grow, because that means that they will lose their main value? And that's the reason this is growing separately.
Yeah, maybe add a couple of thoughts to that, because I think that a lot of the companies are new, but what I'm also seeing is traditional companies, and literally in the last week, I've spoken to one of the biggest real estate companies in the world and one of the biggest banks in the Middle East. They want to know about this. And so I think the big thing is about education. So I think there will be legacy players who will fight it for sure, and particularly in highly centralized, highly regulated industries. But I think there's also a dawning realization in a lot of industries that change is coming and they're not sure how to deal with it. But I also wanted to kind of talk about changing a whole business enterprise to something else, because that's not easy to do. And I think that's one of the reasons that legacy companies struggle, because they've got a whole operation and a ship that's traveling in a certain direction and still needs to keep on doing that for the foreseeable future, because they've got to keep earning revenue and keep the business going. And in the meantime, you've got this kind of other rocket ship taking off into the stratosphere that's creating a whole new world that at some point might absorb the old world, but it's not going to happen with the same people who are driving the old world ship. So I think that companies have got real challenges to face, because you're probably going to need, almost like internal startups, new teams within companies, to be able to help figure out how and where to deploy these new opportunities, and then how that gets integrated across a global company, for example, like the real estate company that I spoke to.
I think one of the great things about blockchain and crypto and digital assets generally is that the ethos is transparency. I mean, I've been working this business for a long time. And at the end of the day, we're all so passionate about the innovation that's taking place that we would love to see more institutions come in and innovate and change their business models, upgrade legacy systems, et cetera. And so I think, the institutional adoption of blockchain technology is happening. It's happening at a slow pace. But there is a lot of interest, because obviously, again, this is a natural progression in, efficiency. And I think, one of the actual potential, let's say, brakes on mainstream adoption is having a knowledge-based digital identity. Because as you may know, decentralized finance has some scalability network congestion issues that's led to, high network fees on Ethereum, et cetera, asset liquidity risk. But, I think what would be really great is for a native identity layer to exist for people. In Web 2.0, all of us are logging into websites with username and passwords. What we really need to know and have is basically a digital identity in Web 3.0 that will fundamentally help embed faster economic transfers on a peer-to-peer basis with, verification of identity without having to use username and passwords, which are not safe. And so, this is something that Web 2.0 really overlooked, but we think is critical and will create a much wider design space for Web 3.0 if we can create a shared, flexible, and resilient identity layer. And so that's something, in addition to education, that I think, is promoting a slower adoption, I would say, because at the end of the day, we don't have a native digital identity that we can use in the decentralized world.
Mm-hmm. And thanks for that. You mentioned the digital ID as an important factor actually to grow the Web3 economy. Mm-hmm. And do you think it's same important when it comes to digital asset adoption to really come first before the economy will grow? So how is, in your opinion, the current state of digital assets adoption affecting the realization of Web3 economy?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think for Web3, digital identity is critical. I think for more mainstream, let's say, usage, trading, staking of digital assets, perhaps it's not as important. I think education is a huge part of it, but the data shows that there is a lot of institutional adoption that's happening, even despite this recent pullback in the market. There was a recent Fidelity survey that showed that 80% of financial institutions believe digital assets should be part of a diversified portfolio. You have about 30% of family offices in Asia and Europe that have exposure to digital assets, whether directly through trading or indirectly through venture capital investments. And one estimate suggests that about 1 million worth of Bitcoin, or 5% of issued supply, is in the hands of institutions. So I think education is a larger piece of the digital asset puzzle, as well as regulation. And regulation is something that at Amber Group we welcome. We've actually proactively worked with regulators to ensure that we have understanding of best business practice and standards so that we can continue to grow and have a sustainable business for the long term. So I think education regulation is more of a hindrance on the digital asset trading side, whereas for more of decentralized finance and Web 3.0, I think it's more the digital identity, which will become really important. And the way that you can think about that is in DeFi, for example, there are a lot of lending and borrowing. That's been one of the primary use cases in DeFi. You've got some, protocols like Aave, which has an incredible amount of total value locked peer-to-peer lending on a daily basis. But the issue is that, typically collateral for DeFi loans range between, 130 and 170%. So by lowering or removing collateral requirements, by leveraging, a digital identifier or identity, that will also pave the way for mass adoption. So, the industry is innovating very quickly. We're creating solutions, finding, ways to solve for these problems on congestibility and scalability. But I think, this innovation, while it's happening, there's very specific things that we need to overcome in order to see that mass adoption that we're all hoping for.
Mm-hmm. Regarding mass adoption, Sandra, you are basically an expert in payments. So how many years from now we are going to become a cashless society, paying only using cryptocurrencies?
Well, I am not signing anything like I'm going to say contractually, like, the truth. But, I still think that we are probably a little bit further, in terms of really seeing this happening. I mean, the first thing for me is really, if I can kind of like look back at, why are we all of a sudden talking about this? I've been in payment for like over 12 years. I knew about the Bitcoin, the cryptocurrency, but it only really started to drag my attention last year, because they were, so much more mediatization around some of those use cases. I mean, from, just seeing like a digital image being auctioned at a Christie house for billions, seeing like the founder of Twitter just, being able to monetize just his first ever tweet. That started to trigger what's going on. And probably then it was like, is this a hype? What's really going on? But if I'm looking at what has happened, you fast forward now 12 months down the line, you see what the governments are doing. Pretty much if you're looking at the European landscape, every regulatory government are talking about it. They all have some sort of project, work stream initiative, trying to bring some sort of sense of trying to kind of, leapfrog into what is this, sort of, happening and where is this heading. Now, if you look at the wider, like the different segment verticals. So yes, we're seeing the gaming for sure. Travel are starting to go into it, not just from a sustainability perspective, but also from, the whole reward, loyalty perspective. We're seeing the same happening with the car insurance industry, with the insurance, in fact, industry, in the sense of they using the whole opportunity to facilitate and streamline this whole essentially experience where you need to make a claim, something has happened. All of this could actually be leveraged by feeding, having a process that feeds onto different systems that get that intelligence, that automates through the use of, the smart contract, different, outcome based on whatever is happening on the front end. And that essentially takes some, care of some of the burden. It takes care in terms of some of the, bureaucracy as well that is associated with dealing with some of the mundane, tasks, just filing a claim and handling it. So it's certainly starting to become more relevant, more, okay, I get that. When I saw the first image, and I'm trying to stay away from not saying a JPEG, because I know that's been quite debatable, people saying, oh, is NFT just a JPEG, right? And why should I care about that? But when I saw that first image being auctioned to today, hearing about use cases that lend itself into the insurance industry, into the banking system, into the retail, the travel, etc., it's 100% starting to go into, mainstream adoption, where we consumer can actually start identifying with some of those areas that, yes, it resonates. Yes, I want to know, I want to learn, I want to take part of it. I think the piece that needs attention is the boarding part, right? Because everything is being built based on the development of the technology, right? What is the extent of, how we can leverage that? Then there's the use case, the consumer. They are not coming enough, from my perspective, on the table to influence how those projects are being led. So what that means is then you've got businesses building fantastic, model use case, using the people that have been, very close to those topics, helping them feed and start building this whole infrastructure. They come to market, and it just doesn't resonate, right? There's a bit of a PR hype and nothing happens. And the reason why, first of all, is you build something, then you need to essentially enable that gap or that transition between taking that to a community that start getting interest, that, take part in the ecosystem, buys it, play with it, get involved. That boarding piece is lacking attention. And for me, it's lacking attention because we're not bringing the end user early enough in terms of where are we heading, how that experience would be best shifted or drafted for getting the buy-in for that community to actually say, yeah, that's a no-brainer, I want to be part of that. So mass adoption, it's still, for me, and this again, personal opinion, I think it's still going to take some time. I'm getting more and more confidence that we're starting to see some really relevant cases that are, driving the right, being driven with the right, I suppose, framework, right, to start, gaining or I suppose, answering, resolving things that matter, right? Beyond just, okay, I'm buying crypto, I'm very wealthy, and I'm keeping the crypto into my wallet. Great. It's a great way because, of course, you're making much better return than keeping your cash in a bank, right? It's definitely opening up a whole new, area in terms of looking at short-term, financing and stuff like that. But it definitely need to move beyond that, to just become commoditized. So having mainstream legacy players starting to accept crypto, enable crypto onto the merchants, website. Yes, that's a great way forward. But the consumer are still, why should I bother taking a crypto? I mean, for argument's sake, taking my crypto wallet to go and buy a piece of bread, right? It's still really, really far detached before we can really talk about that mass adoption. So for me, 5 years, I don't know, still a long way, but it's heading in the right direction.
So I would love to hear your opinion. Yes, I would love to hear your opinion.
Thank you. One is that what we're seeing, and this is really about why would users care? They care because it solves a problem for them. And what we're seeing is the growth in adoption in emerging economies is really outpacing that's taking place in Europe and North America and the West. And, if you look at Chainalysis' recent report on global adoption of crypto, the top 10 and indeed the top 20 countries are nearly all emerging economies. And so I think that is where we're going to see the rapid uptake. And that is, in fact, where we're going to see a lot of the innovation. So I think we have to kind of stop thinking of the development of this technology as a kind of Western-centric thing that we're doing, and actually go and have a look at what's going on in Africa and India and Asia, because that's where I spend most of my time looking, and we're seeing some really fascinating new projects coming up, but also really expanded adoption, and particularly during COVID, when people needed mobile payments, people needed foreign exchange, people needed to earn money when they were shut down and weren't able to earn cash on the street. So that's the first point. The second point that I wanted to make is that we need to call out and name the bad actors in our industry, because one of the things that's going to stop adoption of crypto and legacy players coming in and regulators being difficult is if we ourselves admit that there's a lot of bad behavior in the industry, that we've got wash trading going on with NFTs, that we've got rug pulls and huge amounts of money being stolen from DeFi projects, that we talk about DeFi governance and decentralized autonomous organizations, and many of them are not slightly decentralized, even though we keep saying they are. So I think we've got to get a little bit of honesty in the industry and a little bit of self-regulation, if you like, to try and make sure that we've got the ability to audit codes and call out bad projects. Because if you think about Luna, and obviously Luna was a giant crash that happened a couple of weeks ago, now when you read about it and you talk to people, there were many people who predicted that this was never going to be able to last, and that it was always unstable, and that the crash was coming. So, I just think we also have to I'm the greatest advocate in the world for blockchain and crypto and the metaverse, but we also have to be honest about some of the seamier side of it. And I'm sorry, I have to keep on getting up and down because it's after midnight and the lights are sensor driven.
Yeah, if I can jump in, because I still have like 2 or 3 important questions I would like to ask you, and we are slowly running out of time. I would like our guests to get some practical knowledge out of this meeting. And if you think about cryptocurrency and if you run a company, and how a regular company can actually use cryptocurrency to grow their business? Or maybe a follow-up question would be, which companies or which industries should be looking into using cryptocurrency more than others?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I mean, I can tell you, Amber Group, we've been around officially since 2017, unofficially since 2015, and sort of just touching on the discussion point that was mentioned, having that expertise and knowledge, having been one of the players that helped to build this industry, that insight and knowledge that we have is why we're able to create such value-added products and services for our clients, and why we're so focused on bringing in anyone, whether they're a novice cryptocurrency trader, investor, or a more sophisticated institution, to coming into the digital asset space, because we do believe unequivocally that digital assets will be the most important category of wealth for the future. And it's great because the characteristics of digital assets, are such that it really paves the way for financial democratization and the right to self-determination for people all over the world who have some, capital and an internet connection, right? And so, we're very excited to see the ways in which digital assets not only is being rapidly adopted, but the ways in which clients are actually able to generate and build wealth for the long term. We remitted $150 million worth of interest payments to our clients last year alone, and estimate we've created $500 million worth of wealth for our clients since inception. So just in terms of, cryptocurrencies and, the future for them, I think there's incredible ways in which people can build their wealth. It's not just taking a directional view on Bitcoin or Ethereum or utilizing Bitcoin as a macro hedge, but it's, with these sorts of digital assets, because of their characteristics, that they're portable, there's divisibility, there's durability, you can actually stake them, and you can actually not just participate in the capital appreciation, but you can also lend and borrow them. And so it opens up a lot of different opportunities and different economic models for individuals to really participate in the future of the digital financial infrastructure system. So, I mean, just going back on cryptocurrencies, yes, I mean, there will always be, there's thousands of cryptocurrencies out there. I think we're at a point in innovation where obviously some of them are just meme coins, they don't actually have real use case or utility. But I think as the industry continues to mature, we're obviously going to see volatility come down. We'll also see the yields compress, and we're going to become a more liquid and more mature industry as more participants come in.
Jane, do you, if you were to suggest any specific businesses that should be specifically looking into cryptocurrencies, this is a domain for everyone, and everyone should be observing or should be looking into that, just not to miss the train?
So look, I think we've got some definitional problems, and I think that's one of the things that gets people confused. And in a way, calling them cryptocurrencies is a misnomer, because they're not all currencies. And I think that what we need to have is the development of some kind of universally agreed taxonomy on what these different kinds of tokens are, because there are a whole lot of different kinds of tokens. They have different functions, and many of them are not trying to be money. So I think that that's the first thing, is get the definition right. And there's a debate about whether any crypto is actually money, El Salvador notwithstanding, because the definition of money includes the store of value, unit of account, and medium of exchange. It's debatable whether Bitcoin and Ethereum fulfill all of those categories. It's not that they're not useful, but it's just that they don't necessarily meet the definition of money. So I think what we should be thinking about is the question about all of these different tokens, how they can help a business grow or invest or prepare for, the new world, rather than just think, because I think, it's a bit like having to unlearn things. We're thinking money, fiat money, now it's digital money, and it's the same thing. And it's not. And I think that this is the point about the future. We're building a new future with new opportunities, new economies, new ways of interacting. And most people still go, oh, cryptocurrency, that's money, therefore I need to go and buy something with it. And I think we almost need to disrupt that thought and then start talking about, what the opportunities are. So in terms of your question, obviously all of the things around DeFi, investment, yield, staking, and all the rest of it, there's opportunities people can make money out of it. But I think that there's a whole lot of other aspects, and some of them have been touched today, around tokens and rewards and incentives and gamification and so forth. And those opportunities are very much beyond, the term of money. So I'd go back to my first point, which is we really need to start developing a taxonomy so people understand what it is we're talking about. And then we need to explore on a sector by sector and business by business basis what the opportunities are for them.
Yeah, go ahead.
I really love what you just said, Dr. Jane, because, me being, not so much, kind of like one of the early adopters, it's precisely the first stumbling block. Like what means what, right? Because you almost need to completely unlearn. I'm so in agreement with what you're saying that, and to immerse yourself into understand this whole new ecosystem, being completely detached from all of the different values and definitions that you have taken, because what we're doing is we're trying to take something and we layer it to what we understand, because it goes beyond that, right? So that makes it so complex, and everybody's chipping in, and things are evolving every day. Every day I look at different definitions, different things. So I really like that. And to that, what I wanted really to probably emphasize is how much that demonstrates the gap that businesses are going to have to grow, because you need people, resource, and talent that understand, that start getting into this, system, economy, education, to enable them to then have the vision to build. I mean, you don't just transform by having the roadmap. You need the people, and the people with the product. I think this really outlined how much of a whole new different era, and we need to start, nurturing, promoting now, because we're going to have a gap. We're going to have a gap where people are actually going to find themselves, on the wrong side of the employment, because they're not catching in with the vision and the need of businesses today that want to grow in that space, that want to utilize the brains that can, sort of infuse that creativity. And there's not enough people. It's a very small, close community, but it's a very open community, right? So, I mean, for me, if anything, I love to encourage people to not feel that they are outdated. It's so exciting. People are so welcoming. There's so much to learn. And the very fact is, you may have been there 6 months. If you are detached, you become obsolete. So everybody's catching on. So there isn't such a thing like, feeling embarrassed and thinking, well, it's way too beyond me. Everybody's still figuring out. So I think it's a really good point that you made, and I just wanted to reinforce with those two comments.
Thank you.
One last thing I'd love to mention, just going back to the question, is you asked about what businesses can benefit, what industries, and really the answer is all of them can in different ways. I mean, so many businesses are creating their own private blockchains. They can participate and get on the public blockchains. One way in which we service institutions is in treasury management. We offer 7.5% yield on USD stablecoin, which is pegged to the US dollar. And so, in a no growth, high inflation, no yield, no real return world, where are you going to put your funds? Is it in these money market accounts, or, do you want to earn some yield, in as riskless of a manner as possible, right? With a non-volatile digital asset. And so treasury management services is something where I think the industry is really innovating in, and it's something that we do increasingly with more and more businesses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I agree with you that definitely every business should look into that, and I couldn't agree more with what Jane said regarding the lack of knowledge, or maybe the need to really teach people how to distinguish, for example, what currency really is or is not, how it differs from the tokens, which are often considered as currencies. And my question is, how are we going to do that? Do we need to ask or involve regulators to do that, to define it, or there is a better way to do that?
I don't think you can avoid the regulators. I don't think that's a choice. The regulators will be involved. The question is what they're going to do and how we can engage intelligently with them to help them come up with ways of regulating that's not going to stifle the industry.
They became very active recently, and many people are wondering whether it's the end of cryptocurrencies, or we are going to find the middle ground and we are going to meet halfway.
It's not the end. They got excited about the lunar crash, but they were excited before that. and they're trying to figure it out. And they don't want people getting hurt. They don't want terrorist financing. They don't want money laundering. And they're the things that they're really interested in. And I would have thought that we as citizens of the world don't want those things either. And it's in our interest to help them think about how to do it in a sensible way without crushing the industry.
Yeah, and I just wanted to absolutely, in agreement with that, what I wanted to say is, if you look at the whole of this opportunity again, because for me, it's not just one item in isolation. So, we're talking about token, we're talking about assets, we're talking about the institutional trading side of things. My personal view is that the whole basis of why this is so exciting, right? The whole decentralized approach, the whole transparency, security, right? At the end of the day, as you said, the citizens of the world have kind of pushed for this to be created, right? Because we were essentially living in an economy where your data was not owned and that was being monetized, and you kind of were not a stakeholder in your own content and everything that you could potentially explore with what you're producing. So that's naturally led to what we're having today. But if I'm looking at the pure asset element of it, where the regulators are looking to, of course, they're bringing taxes, they're looking at tackling the whole transparencies versus anonymity, because there's been, of course, the kind of like the reasoning in as crypto essentially was there to facilitate the black trade, right? So all of this, as you said, avoiding this kind of black hole to happen, I feel that there's a sense of, the regulators need to get there. They need to get close to bring, that form, that kind of framework of comfort, so that it essentially unblock and carry down their journey. But if you look at the other side of the spectrum, the whole data, the whole consumers being shareholders of what they produce, monetizing and whatever experience they're building with that, I think it's a little bit difficult to have the regulators playing a part in everything. There's the GDPR in Europe that came into play a few years ago, that was already, to tackle the data piece. Mm-hmm. All that did is just adding, boxes for people like me and you to say, I don't want my data to be retained and I want you to, keep in control. Now we have an opportunity to go way beyond that, right? And to do what we want to do with that data. So there's an element where we need a bit of a framework, but it's got to be very careful, because the reason why Web3 is happening and where the opportunity is, the foundation of it is that decentralized piece, is the whole transparency, is the whole permissionless and so forth. So striking the right balance, I think, needs to be taken on a probably specific use cases basis, and then adding the jurisdiction, and definitely everyone needs to play a part in that, so that we can cohabit happily, right? In that.
Yes, I agree with you. I think it would be best finally to get to the point where all the businesses, growing businesses, new businesses, and regulators will come and sit on one table, and so working jointly to actually address all the concerns that Jane mentioned. Because right now I feel like the war has started, and everyone is trying to be on one of those sides. And I really think there is the dialogue is needed here to make sure that this will not be a never-ending war. We can talk about cryptocurrencies for another 2 hours or 3 hours, but and I expected that this will dominate this discussion today. But I would like to still, at least before we end, touch on some other things than cryptocurrency. Basically, cryptocurrency is using blockchain technology, right? And I whenever I talk to people, I'm under the impression that they cannot name one single other use of blockchain technology. So what, in your opinion, can blockchain as a technology bring to the table where it has biggest advantages and the best applications?
That's the whole encyclopedia. It's just that people don't know it. I mean, when I came into blockchain, it wasn't around crypto. It was around these alternative use cases, because I could see in financial inclusion, in humanitarian settings, in healthcare, in supply chains, in almost every aspect of banking and finance, in reducing in climate action. All of these areas, blockchain has got clear and well demonstrated use cases. It's just people don't know about them. And so I come back to a point that I've made before. There's tremendous work to be done to educate people and show them the real world use cases so they can understand the value of the technology.
So from my perspective, where we're seeing a lot of blockchain value add is on peer-to-peer lending in DeFi. So I mentioned Aave protocol previously. Effectively, if you have a crypto wallet, you've got, some digital assets, you can lend and borrow on a peer-to-peer basis. Everything is recorded on chain, which is immutable. It's transparent. You can go onto Etherscan and see, exactly the transactions. So you think about the payments industry, or at least the remittance industry, which is a huge industry, typically, catered towards, lower income individuals in emerging markets who perhaps are paying exorbitant fees to the likes of, the Western Unions or whatnots, and that they can do this now with instantaneous settlement, cutting out these non-value added intermediaries, right? So that's real world value that's being transmitted to the people that need it the most, right? You can also imagine a situation in which, people are able to earn 10% plus yields on this peer-to-peer lending and borrowing. You have a situation in which, individuals have more financial freedom, the ability to, really work for themselves to a certain extent, and perhaps not have to, move abroad away from their family and work in a foreign country and remit money back to their families. That is going to have an enormous impact on the way that, global employment works, cross-border payments, and it's just the beginning. And so, blockchain has a very incredible and almost destabilizing force in terms of, improving the way in which we process transactions nowadays. And that's what's really exciting about it, because I really feel that the technology is giving the power back to the people for them to be able to determine for themselves their financial future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you built an excitement, and after this 60 minutes, nobody has any doubts that cryptocurrencies, blockchain, Metaverse, NFT, and Web3 will be something very, very important, not only in terms of business, but our daily lives. So the excitement is here, but I would like also to end up this session with hope. And my question is, do you believe that we will solve, hopefully shortly, the energy consumption problem that the industry is generating?
Oh, I'm happy to start with that one. I think there's 2 points I want to make. One is, let's get some perspective, because people like to tell you that Bitcoin uses the energy consumption equal to a small country, but they don't tell you what transportation, agriculture, electricity generation and industry create. So it's not even on that scale. So that's the first thing. But the second thing is, yes, especially Bitcoin and Ethereum, they are carbon guzzlers, and the industry needs to do something about that. And to some extent, people are already moving to greener sources of energy and trying to reduce the energy footprint. But that's only 2 platforms. We've already got the development now of what we're calling the green blockchains with Algorand, Celo, Solana, Cardano, and others that are deliberately being built to minimize the energy footprint. So I tend to find that's a stick that people pull out to club us over the head to find a thing to be critical about. But I think we need to get some perspective and also respect what the industry is doing to reduce its carbon footprint.
I think very quickly from my perspective, because I'm absolutely not close to that topic. And yes, you're right. I'm seeing all of these big headlines in terms of, how outrageous and unethical this and how unsustainable. For me, the main thing or the comfort is to see that this debate is happening, right? There is already, work groups that are addressing, there's a conscious, effort to essentially bring a resolution to that. And in isolation, as Dr. Jane said, what I've also seen is that, you've got the other side of the industry that is saying, well, there's the argument that essentially with everything that gets automated and the efficiency that you can build by running or transforming your business, utilizing the new technologies, you essentially equally have the opportunity to reduce your manpower, the infrastructure that you're operating in, and that goes with electricity consumption, the people, the computers, everything, all of that is equally some of the other side of the debate that I'm hearing. But bottom line is, it's not necessarily comparable to comparable, like a apple to apple. There's certainly a whole lot of different stir in that conversation, but it's not being shied away from. People are definitely, it's being addressed. I can see a lot of forums around that, and certainly keen to see how that progresses, because even all the way down to retailers, right? Everybody's got the same problem, right? I mean, they need to think about recycling. They need to become more efficient in terms of how we are delivering our product, how we are consuming. So it's a wide, spread problem within all of the different industries as well. So.
I think what I would say to that, and I agree with all those points, is the fact that this is still a nascent industry that's been around, barely over a decade, right? And we are innovating faster than probably any industry in the history of the world, right? Just given, again, the technology and the amount of investment that's pouring into the space, right? So yes, Bitcoin is, proof of work and will always be, and that is energy intensive. It's still less energy intensive than the gold industry. But Ethereum, for example, with the merge is moving to proof of stake, right? And there is a real conscientiousness about wanting to be sustainable and obviously not ignore these real societal concerns. I think even financial institutions, obviously thematically, are very concerned with ESG, impact investing, et cetera, right? Because at the end of the day, we need to have a long-term strategy, as a species on this planet. So, I think that's very much a bad rap, but it's something that, we need to take the data into account, and we need to see the incredible speed at which we are improving upon the existing frameworks and how we're creating new frameworks for reducing energy consumption. A lot of mining operations now are actually leveraging sustainable energy sources, alternative energy sources, right? So again, I think we need to put data to facts, and we need to clarify sort of the reputation of the industry that, we are innovating as fast as possible. But, we still have a ways to go.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. It wasn't an easy discussion to moderate, because you have so many great insights that it's so hard to stop you and to cut you. Every actually comment of yours can trigger a separate discussion. So, but at least I want to give this next 15 minutes for our guests to give them a chance to ask questions. So Jerzy, I know you have organized these questions a little bit. So yes. If you can drive the Q&A session, that would be great. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks. And thank you to all our great speakers for sharing our business perspective. It was a very interesting discussion, but actually we had we had another very interesting discussion on the chat, a lot of questions from the participants, even some answers. So the discussion was really, really active today. And I think we have a few minutes to read out a few of these questions, and our guests will be happy to answer them. So the first question is from Musa Educative. What are the thoughts on the collaboration EdTech and FinTech with Web 3.0 from broader perspective and for an individual?
I didn't understand did you say EdTech?
EdTech, yeah, EdTech and FinTech.
I'm not familiar with EdTech, I must admit.
Like education.
Education technology.
Yeah. Go ahead, Sandra.
No, Jane, you're more of an expert. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm not quite sure what the question is about from a broader perspective of the individual, but I think that EdTech and FinTech will absolutely be a core part of Web3. There's no doubt about that. And I think that education, we haven't spoken a lot about that today, but I think that that's one of the areas that's going to be really advantaged through the opportunities of Web3. I'm not quite sure what the question is meaning about an individual, but the whole democratization of access to all of these things is only going to be better for individuals. But I don't know if that was their question. Sophia, you might have something to add.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking actually about my own personal experience, because I remember as a young child doing Reader Rabbit and Math Rabbit online on the DOS system, Web 1.0, and thinking through, ways in which Web 3.0 will lend itself to better ed tech and education, right? So it goes back to what you were saying earlier about, gamification, interactive games, rewarding and incentivizing changing behaviors. I could see a future in which, students are actively involved in games that are, whether it's play to earn, play to learn, or some combination thereof, and where people are really engaged and incentivized to build upon their knowledge, to learn online. I'm not saying that, textbooks and pencil and paper are going away, but all I'm saying is that I think they're very innovative and creative ways in which we can leverage technology and Web 3.0 to help educate people. And I mean, just look at Web 2.0 with the advent of YouTube and the ability to access, information globally, instantaneously at 24/7, right? So I think we're just going to see more innovations and ways in which to immersively engage in interactive fashion and be rewarded for taking the time to educate or perhaps provide education services to others. I don't know off the top of my head any projects or companies that are actively doing it, but I can bet that there are many of them that are building capabilities right now.
Yeah, there's quite a number that I'm aware of, and that was a great comment.
Excellent. Thank you for the answer. I hope it answered the original question. And the next one is actually specifically for Sophia. Could you please expand or explain again the monetization differences between Web 2.0 and 3.0? I am trying to understand the difference in data ownership and the impact it could have. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so again, just to give a quick reminder, Web 2.0, the Facebooks of the world, where we just put up a whole lot of information about who we are, where we went to school, who our friends are, whether that be in text form or photographs. All that information companies have been analyzing, they've been aggregating, they've been monetizing it without us knowing, selling it to third parties, and that is information that has value. Data has value. So in Web 3.0, I see a future in which that, again, having a digital identity, being able to monetize that yourself, wherefore, companies might ask you to provide your data, but in return for money, right? As opposed to giving it away for free to different companies. In Web 3.0, as well, NFTs, if I own data, whether it be a piece of art or a piece of real estate, and I can leverage smart contracts to be able to trade it, to be able to stake it, that's another way in which I have data that I own, whether it be like, again, digital art or actual real estate, backed by real assets. That's another way in which I can monetize those assets in Web 3.0. So those are just a couple of examples, but I think it's a very distinct difference between the way in which things have worked previously and the way in which they will work in the future. And I think that's really, really exciting.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a really good answer to the question. Okay, so the next one is from Amilcar. How can we deal with companies that think that investing in the blockchain is a waste of time and money? Interesting question.
You know what? I mean, that's very, very, very interesting, and I'm not going to necessarily have the right answer, but that just sort of brings me to, I think Christine, the European Bank, EBC, Christine.
Oh, yeah. Lagarde.
Yes, Lagarde, that's right. Who went on to, I think it was university or some sort of student sort of community, and was just saying, this whole thing, blockchain, is worth nothing. So it's quite powerful statement, right? For that, first of all, organization, and her representing that organization to publicly, without necessarily giving enough of a context to make that statement. And I'm not definitely taking part in that debate, but with that questions of that person saying how to deal with a company that doesn't see the value in the blockchain, you know what? I think that there is enough company out there. There is enough of a community to essentially take yourself and do your DIOR. So do your own research, start getting involved, because if a company doesn't align with their vision, with their strategy, there's really hardly anything, I guess, that you can start influencing, because at the end of the day, it has to sit at the core of the operation. They need to see a benefit, and it's not going to work for everyone in the interim time, right? I mean, it's not the case that everybody needs to start jumping on it. You need to find the right synergy, and it needs to solve a use case. It needs to be relevant. So there is such a big community. There's such open doors. I mean, the community are absolutely welcoming that diversity of profiles, and there is a need for education, which has been talked about a lot during that conversation. So for me, it's kind of not taking too much of a, stance where, okay, this is the end of the road. Just take yourself out and do the work for yourself. And from doing the work for yourself, you then start building a career and a path for you to start getting closer to get involved in those projects. If that makes sense. I hope that was the question.
I mean, just if I may say, I think the beauty of the marketplace is that, companies innovate or die. I hate to say such a dire thing, but, think about companies that had, fixed space on Main Street, no e-commerce solution, and how they unfortunately have, probably not survived in the Web 2.0 era, right? So at the end of the day, I think the real opportunity is that everybody equally can evolve and innovate and get up to speed and participate. And I think it's just a matter of, at the end of the day, wherever market demand is, whatever service, the services you provide, if it's value added to the consumer, your business will survive and thrive. But at the end of the day, the marketplace, it's a competitive world out there, and you have to continuously adapt and ensure that your business is future-proof. And that's what this really comes down to. Is your business future-proof? Do you understand the innovation that's taking place? How are you positioned for it? Do you have shareholders that are concerned about your, viability in the future? These are all really important questions that I think, and I hope organizations and businesses are asking themselves when they hear and learn about Web 3.0.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I also think that it's not what we can do with these companies, it's what they should do to not get behind the competition. Yeah. So the next question is, what are the impacts of current economical situation globally inflation will have on DeFi or cryptos and NFTs?
I think that the current situation of inflation globally is providing stronger arguments for people to be using and investing in cryptos, and I think that cryptos will get stronger despite the current slump. There's a bigger issue about what's going on in the global monetary system that question probably begs to have a comment on, because we're used to a system that's denominated by the US dollar, which used to be gold-backed and since 75 hasn't been gold-backed. But we're in a big new world now, because we're in the world of the big techs all entering into financial services, and some of them have got bigger economies than every country in the world except India and China. You've got China rolling out the digital yuan, and the potential that it could require the 110 plus Belt and Road countries to use the digital yuan rather than any alternative currency. And then you've got all of the developments and innovation in the crypto sector, if you like, with stable coins and then the whole discussion about CBDC. So I think we're really at a real inflection point in terms of what's going to happen in the global monetary system. And, there are a lot of pieces to it, not just one. So I just wanted to throw that in, which I know isn't the answer to the question, but I think it's a really important point to contemplate.
I mean, as I mentioned before, we're in a very high inflationary paradigm, globally speaking. We've got a real macroeconomic crisis on our hands. And obviously, central banks are rushing to do what they can, probably a bit too late and too little. But, again, I go back to, creating wealth in this new digital era. You have high yields available on USD stablecoin, 7% plus. You can stake digital assets. So there's in tremendous ways in which people can not only create wealth using digital assets, but also protect their existing wealth. And so, it's prudent to consider, digital assets at a minimum, given the fact that there are real returns that can be achieved in the space that you cannot find in the traditional asset classes.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks everyone. Actually, I think we are running out of time and also out of questions, because there was one more regarding the environment, but we also already covered that during the discussion. So I guess we could talk about it like for another 2 hours, but let's not do it. Maybe let's schedule another session to discuss it further. I hope you really enjoyed it, and thank you for all the participants and of course our experts. To all the participants, please remember to check your inboxes after the event in a few days to get the recordings. And the event will be back soon with more. And if we didn't cover anything that you're interested in, you can find our today's experts on LinkedIn. I'm sure they will be glad to answer all of your questions and get back to you. And so that's it for today. A big thank you once again to all our great listeners. Stay tuned and see you at the next webinar. Thanks.
And thank you for
Thank you very much.
panel. Thank you.